So myself, I'm Tristan Fry from SoFi. I'm joined by Brian Randalls from Evolve Consulting. And we're really excited to talk about how SoFi was looking to leverage AI to really transform what is a really just painful, arduous process as part of supplier oversight, and that's contract reviews. So we'll go through and we'll look at how something that started as an idea to be able to streamline this contract analysis really turned into an opportunity to rethink how we actually utilize unstructured data at scale.
Obviously, Tristan and I will give a little background on ourselves, a little bit about us. We'll talk a little bit about the organizations we're with, where we came from. Obviously, we're from Dallas. Then we want to talk about the problem statement. Tristan will dive in a little bit more about what the challenges are at SoFi, the issues that they've been facing, kind of the redundancy and kind of the, can I dare as far to say, bang your head off the table a little bit with some of the challenges and what we've been solving for. And then with the solving piece, understand what the use case is and how we actually solve that.
Yeah, so quick introduction on ourselves. So Tristan Fry, Director of Supplier Management and Performance at SoFi. And I lead a team that is really focused on driving strong supplier relationships and really also driving that performance oversight of those third-party relationships within the ecosystem.
And I'm Brian Randalls. I'm with Evolve Consulting out of Dallas, Texas. I'm a principal with Evolve, and I really pride myself in solving challenges, leveraging AI and data, and helping clients like Tristan.
So many of you have probably heard of SoFi. We're more than just a stadium, though it is a very impressive stadium. If you ever get a chance, you can tour there. It is really cool. And it's amazing the technology that is mixed in, which goes really well with SoFi. So SoFi is a modern digital-first financial institution. So we were created to help our members get their money right. And we have a broad range of financial services now. So we've got not just the lending, but we have credit cards, banking, investing, financial planning. So it's all kind of wrapped in to this seamless technology-driven experience. And we actually today have over 10 million members across the US. So that's really helps us to get out there and empower those individuals to achieve their financial independence and realize what their ambitions are. So it could be refinancing a student loan, could be buying their first house, could be investing for the first time. So that's where SoFi is there to support them throughout that journey.
So let's talk about Evolve. We at Evolve, we're a Snowflake True Blue elite partner. We specialize in solving deep expertise challenges within AI, within the data space, really working to be a trusted advisor with our partners and with our clients, such like Tristan. Our work spans multiple industries. I'm focused currently in financial services, but we specialize in complex environments, those like financial services where there's heavy governance and a lot of regulation in that capacity. I think one of the things I would want to call out, probably most importantly, at least from my perspective regarding Evolve, is the fact that we truly emphasize putting our relationships with our clients together. So we value that human connection. And I think over the past years that we've been engaged with SoFi and Tristan and the team, we've been able to leverage what we've built there to not only be a trust advisor, but also work through technically and have tough conversations around challenges to solve problems. And I think that's been a good kind of baseline for how we've gotten here today.
Certainly. All right, so how I mentioned the question about who's been asked to do a very manually, intensive effort and do that over and over again? Well, that's what we were asked to do. So last fall, SoFi launched the creation of a new organization called the Supplier Management Office. And so it's created to drive structure, consistency, and rigor to how we manage our third parties. Well, not long after the team was stood up, we were actually asked to do a supplier performance gap assessment on a subset of the business ahead of a regulatory exam. So this would be something new that we'd never done before. And some of these areas we never supported before. So this is all new to us. So the scope of the review was looking at performance data, was looking at due diligence information, looking at any issues, and then also looking at, do we have the key contractual terms in place, and are they in compliance with our current standards? So knowing this probably wouldn't be the last time that we get asked to do this, and thinking about, man, this is gonna be a lot of work. It's gonna take a lot of time. How can we do this better and faster in the future? And so use this as an opportunity to really engage the Evolve team early and say, hey, I've got this problem. Is there a way we can maybe utilize AI and new technologies to be able to improve this, drive consistency, and be something that we're not doing just for this one assessment, but we can do it repeatedly and at a broader scale in the future?
Yeah, that's a good baseline, Tristan. And I would add to that, the next question came up, there has to be a way to do this. There has to be a way to improve efficiency. There has to be a way to do this with AI. We knew there was a capability to do that. And really it comes down to, how do we drive that efficiency? How do we create capability to do document searches and automate that intelligently? And that's really where this conversation kind of baselines and begins, with the use of Snowflake, Cortex AI, Cortex Search, to be able to kind of dive in and start understanding the current state and how we could solve for that and drive into the use case a little bit more.
Yeah. So we looked at that supplier gap assessment. We focused in on one specific area. So we looked at contracts. So how can we utilize this and be able to focus on that specific piece? So we had 92 contracts across 18 suppliers that we had to assess, and we were looking at 7 key contractual terms to identify, were those there, were they present? And if you saw it like before, saying 7 to 10 hours typically is what it would take. Now this is from beginning to end, to be able to find the contract. Is it still active? Does it apply to this relationship? And be able to go through all of that. And you think about an individual that has to do that. What are they doing? You're pulling up the PDF, you're doing control find, you're trying to also then search for things because not all the terms are the same in every single contract. And then once you find that and have interpreted it, now you have to go log it into probably a spreadsheet somewhere to say like, okay, here's what I found, and be able to now catalog all that. That's a lot of time, a lot of effort to do that. And also has a lot of opportunity for error. People get tired, people miss things. And again, terminology could be slightly different. So that's where we look to say, could we do a quick proof of concept and test the feasibility and the impact of using these AI-enabled tools to really drive this review process and be more sustainable?
Thanks, Tristan. I think the one thing I would add to this as well, if you look at the 5 boxes here that we have talking about workflow, I want you to switch your mind a little bit, getting away from traditional workflows. And I know some of you mentioned you've been doing document searches from AI. So to align with that thinking, this is the process we used when we were looking with Snowflake, specifically with Cortex AI, with Cortex Search, and carrying out these capabilities. So you have upload contracts, you have contract ingestion, and I'll dive in a little bit more deeply in this. This is just a high-level contextual flow. But give it a capability to where you could also search those contracts. And then not losing sight of having expert review capabilities, because obviously there's going to maybe be some learning that takes place as a part of this. So as we go through those learnings, we want to be able to not lose sight of the SME inputs that come into that and be able to factor that in such that things get better and they learn and everything keeps improving with retraining the models in that capacity. So this is where, if we kind of use the concept of lifting the hood, this is where you can kind of dive in and look. What you're looking at here is essentially the intelligent search RAG approach, RAG model. RAG, it's a high-level conceptual architecture if you think of it in that capacity. Simple, because I want to walk through this contextually. I want to make sure that everything drives home with how this is represented in that capacity. So when you look under the hood, you can see that we've got Cortex AI to turn on contract documents into intelligent search, not just pieces of words, but actually mathematically create vectors to where you can use this documentation and become intelligent as a result of that. So looking at the flow, it starts with the user. You have contract PDFs, the documentations, they all get captured together into an orchestration layer. That orchestration, what happens within orchestration is you have parsing of the documents, you have chunking of the documents, you have all of this preparation, if you will, that takes place for the documentations to be processed actually in Cortex AI. All of that is taking place within Snowpark. Once that preparation is done, then you have the embeddings that are actually created within Snowflake Cortex AI. Now, I probably don't need to say this to all of you, I kind of alluded to it, but think of a vector embedding, just loosely speaking, as, like I mentioned a minute ago, a mathematical equation. It's a way to structure and collect that information to where it can be used effectively from the intelligent search perspectives that'll come when it comes to the questions that are being asked, the prompts. All of that information is then stored in the Snowflake warehouse. Out of that then, as I mentioned, you have users. You have interaction with those users. So Tristan's team could sit down, they could go through a Streamlit application that was hosted within the Snowpark Container Services. They could prompt their question and say, do these documents contain key contractual clauses? Do they have right to audit, such as, what are some other, one other key term, but essentially there's...
Yeah, right to audit, subcontracting, SLAs, breach notification, indemnification.
So now that we have all of this information created, the question can get asked, and as a response, that information will come back to where it's passed through the LLMs. In our case, we used Llama 3 in that capacity. The information then, you have the request response kind of interaction, the typical chat user interface that you would experience. And what would be returned then would be your documentation that shows what was searched, the question that was asked, and the documentation, not only from the standpoint of whether or not the information did exist, but the keywords highlighted contextually, or if there were confidence errors, we could have a SME look at that to then revamp and retrain and re-ingest that back through the model such that then everything was improved moving forward. So I kind of buzzed through that.
So let's take
leave anything out?
Let's take a look at this like from the viewpoint of the user. So my team essentially has a place where we store all our contracts that then got fed into Snowflake. The Evolve team had it all set up in Snowflake to then be able to be presented in a UI. And from there, we could either search on like one contract and all those terms we're looking for, or we could actually say like, okay, I want to search for all the contracts for Snowflake and search for all these contractual terms, and then provide a response back. And the great thing about that is that we can now train it. It's not this black box. It shows exactly what it found, why it found it, and a confidence rating compared to what our standard terms were. And then from there, a user who is experienced and be able to digest that can now provide input back into the model to then train it to improve its reviews in the future. So from us, we went from having to search and find every single contract, understand what was active, to now be able to give some parameters, to then allow the tool to go and find that and present it to one individual to now be able to go through and sift through it.
Yeah, and I think some of you may know, but to say it out loud, to iterate, all of this is contained within Snowflake, so it never leaves the environment. There's no, we uphold governance, we uphold the security standards. Everything is intact and in play with that in mind as we go through this conversation. And that's another big point for SoFi, obviously.
Yeah. Why did we use Snowflake? Well, we used Snowflake simply because that was our infrastructure. So we were in the process of actually moving all of our data into Snowflake. And we looked at, okay, what are capabilities that we already have that we could potentially start to use? And then what are those that we can maybe quickly turn on to be able to leverage? And very thankful that we already had the Snowflake infrastructure there. And then we just had to quickly turn on the Cortex piece of it.
Yeah, and the other key takeaway that I would add to this, kind of thinking from the business mindset standpoint, one of the capabilities kind of front and center from the end of this was we started getting interest from other groups within the organization outside the SMO, legal, compliance. I mean, you could even put a case together with this for HR in that capacity. Really, it's structured in such to where it's almost templatized in the capacity to where it can solve a problem in that need. This, again, was structured specifically for contracts with intelligent searching in that capacity to serve for Tristan's needs.
Yeah. All right, so what was the outcome, right? What do we see? All right, big number at the top, 96%. Where is that coming from? Well, okay, let's go back and look. What were we doing? We were looking at 92 contracts across 18 different suppliers, 7 key contractual terms. So we did a time study with my team compared to the tool. So I had 6 individuals that spent 29 hours going across all of that. Again, that's finding it, now doing the control find, interpreting it, and now logging it somewhere. And that was just on the contract review piece. Again, remember, we're also looking at performance, we're also looking at issues, we're looking at due diligence. So add 29 hours to that as well. Well, what did the tool do? So this was our first iteration after minimal training. It came back and it did the whole thing within an hour. Every single contract, every single supplier, everything within 1 hour. Now you just take maybe a little bit now of one person's time to now go through and manually review maybe the items that are flagged as lower confidence that needs review, and then maybe do some QA, some sampling to make sure that it's meeting and working as expected and train that model. But 96%, I mean, that was a huge, mind-blowing. Like, I knew it would be good. I didn't know it was going to be 96% good.
Well, to add to that too, I think one thing that I think that everybody in this room should think about, and quite honestly more broadly should think about, is, Tristan will laugh because I talk to him quite a bit about AI and I tend to pontificate a bit, but there's so much conversation around AI and what it's going to be from an impact perspective. And I always try to talk to it from the standpoint of, how is it helping? What does that mean? What does it mean to people? What does it mean to individuals? And this specific example is a fantastic case, because what we were seeing, you see the 96%, right? The numbers look great. The reality of it is, Tristan's team, it wasn't impactful to them from a negative standpoint. It was impactful to them from a positivity standpoint, meaning they had more time to do their actual jobs. They weren't sifting through documentation, keyword searches, manually, Control F, and I think I mentioned at the beginning, kind of banging your head off the table a little bit. It really does open up a capability to where they're more efficient, they can do their jobs, and maybe expand out and do some other things that may have been falling off the plate a little bit. So it's really a case where AI, and specifically AI that's backed and enabled by Snowflake and Cortex and these capabilities within Snowflake, have really brought front and center efficiency, not just from numbers perspectives, but how numbers reflect to actual impacts to humans and the work that's being done.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, because you think about 28 hours, what could I have my team doing other than just doing control find? Like, they could be out supporting the business, driving the business goals, working with the suppliers, negotiating deals, helping to address issues. Actually use the individuals for the skills that they bring and that subject matter expertise, where we can use the modern technologies to be able to drive these more administrative processes. You can kind of look at, we had 18 suppliers, 92 contracts. That was just a very small subset of over 1,000 suppliers that we have and thousands of contracts.
Yeah.
And that was one of the cool takeaways from this is like, okay, what else could we do with this? So we started thinking about it. Well, what were we doing part of the full supplier gap assessment? So we were looking at the performance data, issues, due diligence status. So we were like, okay, well, we did a little side test too, right? So we added kind of just some basic content for that as well, to see if we had this all in Snowflake and we had the structure built out within the model, could we then go through and effectively do this full review in a very quick fashion? And it showed that it could, which was really impressive.
Yeah. And one thing I kind of glazed over a little bit, which I would touch on, is when we started this process, and I think you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, there were some conversations happening from gap perspective, gap analysis perspective. But one of the really cool things that we found was when we started building things out, maybe, this is a ballpark figure, but roughly about 3 days, we had things structured and set up to where things could start. We had a conceptual flow of how things would work. We had interfaces built. We had all the capabilities in place. Now, there was some work to be done for a few weeks around coding, making sure we had data in the right places, kind of the T's and C's and functionalities. But really, again, not to belabor it, but Snowflake does provide the capabilities and really accelerates the opportunity for which we build out with Tristan. And I think that's something that needs to be reinstated. And again, just to put the icing on the cake, the data is secure, the governance, everything is intact from that perspective.
Yeah, I know for me, from being a team lead, where we've got to be able to focus and be able to pivot, and we always have new priorities. I mean, everyone's got things coming up, right? Hey, you're being asked to do something, manual effort, going to keep doing it. Well, how can we do this in an efficient way? And so let's say we get a new data protection addendum that we now need to go through and figure out where do we need to make changes with our existing. So we could utilize this capability to now look across our entire supplier population and all of the contracts to be able to identify where do we have data protection addendums that are maybe out of date and aren't aligned with our key terms, and do that within a matter of hours now, as opposed to who knows how much to be able to do all that across the thousands of suppliers that we have. So really, really impressive stuff.
Yeah, to add to Tristan's piece there, another kind of what I call it extensibility, it may be inappropriate to say it that way, but there's opportunities to leverage Doc AI as well in the case where you don't know where documents are, or you might know, but you can kind of extend that capability to start working in that capacity and kind of do a little bit more homework and understand where things reside. But that'll plug into this process. It's extensible in that capacity. That's why I'm defining it like that. But we've talked about that a little bit. There's definitely opportunities, I think, where you're in a situation where you know where most of your documentation is. So the searches are a little bit different in that capacity. But there is the capability then, if you don't know, we can create a capability to go search and look for that as well using those capabilities. So I think I've said capability now.